apart, the centre cannot hold. These words, written by the poet Yeats almost a century ago, have a renewed resonance today. This has been a year of earthquakes and upheavals. It has been a year of resistance, of new beginnings, of raging against the machine. Just months ago, we witnessed the re-election of Jeremy Corbyn. The Blairite saboteurs were delivered a second, even more decisive defeat. But the battle for the soul of the Labour Party remains unresolved. Meanwhile, Cameron and Osborne have been consigned to the dustbin of history. The EU referendum dealt a shattering blow to Britain's political establishment and to the capitalist class itself. At root, the Brexit vote represented a working class revolt. It was not an endorsement of the racist, pro-big business leaders of either the official Leave or Remain campaigns. First and foremost, it was an expression of raw class anger. But it is not just in Britain that intense political upheaval is taking place. Crisis and instability dominate the globe. This week, millions of us watched in horror as the most hated presidential candidate in US electoral history, a racist and sexist billionaire, marched into the White House. Trump's rise is a symptom of the profound failure of the capitalist system. In an extremely distorted way, this election also represented an expression of the deep-going anger at the rotten status quo. Hillary Clinton was the candidate of Wall Street, of disastrous bloody wars, and it was this fact, the fact that she so clearly stood for the 1%, that ultimately rendered her unelectable. Now, in the aftermath of Trump's victory, there are those who would argue that the left should enter a period of collective mourning and of despair. They warn that the political ground has shifted irrevocably rightwards. They counsel caution, propose we retreat further into the deep pessimism of lesser evilism. But you will find no such despair at Socialism 2016. Here we say, don't mourn, organise. Genuine Marxists are by disposition optimists. We must always be utterly sober in analysing the realities of the political situation that we face at any given time. But we must also look to the potential and the possibilities that exist. In 2016, we saw the stirring of working class people, the huge willingness that there is to struggle. We saw the enormous hunger that exists for a political alternative, as well as the potential dangers there are when no such alternative has been built. As socialists, our role is never simply to mourn defeats or even to celebrate victories and advances. It is always to say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done, to point out what is necessary. Tonight's speakers are all people with a record of doing just that. They are people with experience of real class struggle, people with ideas to change the world. So to begin tonight's rally, I want to start by introducing a speaker from the PCS union. PCS is one of the most fighting trade unions in Britain today. It stands out, along with a sadly small number of others, as a union that is prepared to take on the buses and fearlessly represent its members. Many of you will have seen Mark Sawatka advertised on our programme, and he had agreed to speak to us tonight. But many of you will also know that unfortunately Mark is currently very unwell and in hospital, so sadly he cannot be here. So I'm sure the whole will want to join me in offering him our best wishes for a very speedy recovery. Janice Godrich, the president of PCS, has also sent us a solidarity greeting tonight. We are very lucky, however, to be joined tonight by Chris Boff, who is the Assistant General Secretary of PCS. Chris is a tireless fighter on behalf of PCS members, and he will also be very well known to many of us here as a member of the Socialist Party. He is also one of the 75 expelled socialists who has signed the petition which has gone to the Labour Party for readmission. So please, everyone, give him an extremely warm welcome tonight.
Well, thanks, Claire, and comrades, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak tonight and to bring my personal support to this great celebration and discussion of socialist ideas. And I'm sure I won't be the first or the last to comment on the fact that I think it's fair to say we're living in some strange and weird times. While it's important always to recognise the profound dangers reflected in, obviously, Donald J. Trump's election, reminds you of Leonard Cohen's apocalyptic song, The Future, the racism that we see in British society should be remembered, stoked up before the Brexit vote, still stoked up afterwards by right-wing politicians and the gutter press. The growth of the far right we see across Europe, with some very worrying elections coming up in a number of countries in the next few months. But while it's important to recognise those profound dangers, I think it's equally important to recognise the possibilities that exist in the world today, the possibilities of building support for socialist ideas that we're beginning to see spreading across the world. And I think it's equally important to recognise that when 90 companies from the dawn of the industrial age, from 1751 to 2004, are responsible for 2/3 of greenhouse emissions, with 50% pumped out in the last 25 years alone, I think we've got to recognise capitalism is utterly incapable of taking the decisive action on climate change on the scale or the time that is needed. And it means the struggle for socialism, and it's reflected in the work of our comrades in the United States, is about the fight for socialism is now a fight about saving the very planet on which we live. Now, the Tory government, Theresa May, claims that she's governing for the many and not the privileged few. But I think it's fair to say from a PCS perspective, or perspective of every public sector worker, there is no respite. The spending plans based on Osborne's plans of 2015 are determining what they're doing, and unless we stop them, as with austerity, Brexit will become the pretext yet again for making the working class pay the price. After 20% cut in the civil service in the last 6 years, every department is confronted with a massive programme of job cuts and office closures. We're now confronted with the imposition of imposed changes to the compensation scheme, which represents a cut between 25 to 30% in redundancy payments to our members, all designed, as we know, to help the employer shed jobs quicker and cheaper. After the farce of negotiations, I'm pleased to say that the unions representing 30,000 of civil service workers, ourselves and the PLA representing in excess of 200,000 civil service workers, have stood out against this particular attack. Now, I'm reminded of the quote, when you see what's come the way of PCS, reminded of the quote of Noam Chomsky, who said that for ruling elites, successful defiance must always be punished. And PCS's track record, with Mark and the NEC's leadership in defending members, in promoting activism, in galvanising opposition across the wider trade union movement, we've seen an attack on union facility time, an attack on workplace organisation, but it's also an attack on the leadership of the union, best expressed in a document written to the board of Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, a department that should be collecting and dealing with the tax dodgers, spending time to discuss a document that, I quote, on how to deal with the intractable problem of PCS, and yes, I quote, to achieve the degradation of PCS's organising capability by permanently reducing the influence of its union leaders. In Britain, the PCS is the only union that's had to deal with the removal of check-off, a method of collecting our subs. But we've got on with that, and we've defied the Tory attempts to break this union, financially and organisationally, by recruiting over a 6-month period, effectively over 152,000 out of the 160,000 members we needed to recruit. That's our answer to those that have attempted to break this union. And we can be relied upon to continue to fight back, to keep on keeping on. We're going to build up the support in our groups. 2 examples, a marvellous demonstration, for example, that we saw last Saturday with PCS and Unison and other unions and campaigners, artists, defending and fighting against the cuts in the museums and galleries. And of course, it has to be remembered, that's built on the industrial battles of our members in the National Gallery and the successful battles that we've had in the museums of Scotland and Wales. Noteworthy with a contingent from the French CGT, bringing their own solidarity and a big contingent. And again, I make the point that after Brexit, as the European Union disintegrates effectively, it's going to be even more important that we build our own independent, working-class international links. I just want to talk about just a couple more examples. And again, just, satire is dead in some ways, as somebody once said. In the Equality and Human Rights Commission, we're currently involved in a dispute against massive job cuts and office closures. And we found, as a result of the pressure on the employer, that 73% of BME staff employed by the Equality and Human Rights Commission have been selected and targeted for redundancy. And the only thing we can say is that we will continue to fight in every way possible. We will continue to build up the support and action in individual groups, and most importantly, to continue the pressure for the British trade union movement to recognise and step up to its responsibilities and organise the coordinated strike action that is going to be needed if we're serious about halting the government attacks upon the working class. Now, in drawing to a close, I also just want to make a brief observation and pay tribute to the Prison Officers Association. Now, we're told in many quarters that the panoply of anti-union laws, the new threshold, make it virtually impossible to fight back. Well, the POA showed, not that you saw much in the newspapers, they showed that they were prepared to take action, illegal, coordinated strike action against the inhuman conditions that prevail in the British prisons of today. And they forced this government back to the table to negotiate properly. That is a reflection of union power, but it also speaks volumes about how the trade union movement should respond to the anti-union law. Now, we know the attacks that they perpetrated. It goes back from Ridley, the early 80s. Bill Mullins' book in British Leyland gives a flavour of that. How to isolate particular disputes in the early 80s to prepare the ground for the big battle with the miners. And of course, I just need to make a quick comment that that's of course why the Tories and the state are terrified of an inquiry, not just because it means getting justice for those that were victimised, but at the same time it will expose the massive state conspiracy that was applied to defeat the most powerful union in the land. Our only answer being asked to sum up is, and there's no shortcut to this, but our only answer is to develop an industrial and political programme, a militant industrial and political programme that is worth fighting for. That is how we galvanise opposition to this government and the capitalist class. And my very final line is that workers created trade unions, historically it should be remembered, out of nothing but necessity. 150 to 180 million, for the same reason, 150 to 180 million workers, public sector workers in India took the biggest general strike in human history took place in September. And I'm sure that unions will continue to play a part in the discussions this weekend, in the resurgence of socialist ideas in the UK and across the world, and a big part in the impending struggle of the international working class to eventually win what is rightfully ours. Thanks for listening, comrades.
Thank you to Chris for that excellent contribution. Continuing along a theme of fighting trade unions, the next person I want to invite to take the stage is Sean Hoyle, who is the president of the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union. Over the last month, the workers' movement has got behind the RMT as they've taken on the profiteers of Southern Rail. So I'll introduce Sean. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move that over there. I've got to say, I've been looking through all my old videos of The Simpsons the last few days, trying to work out what the future of our political system is going to look like. Because when you realise that 16 years ago they had an episode and they actually had Donald Trump as the President of America, you know, who would have thought? I didn't find too much, I've got to say. I'm going to start on a serious note, which is kind of rare for me, but I do like to make one thing clear to people when I speak. And I speak as the president of the RMT, and I'm very proud to do that. And as a trade union, we have something like a Bible. We call it our rule book. And it's important to remind people that rule number 1 in our Bible is that we must strive to replace the capitalist system with a socialist order of society. And that mustn't just be empty words. I certainly believe it. I certainly try to do my best to push in that direction. Of course, a lot of people, you know, they smile and they will say nothing. Or if they're brave enough to say something, it's, oh, you know, is that not a little bit out of date? Can we really achieve that? Well, you certainly can't achieve it if you don't try. So I'm going to tell a quick story now, which I've told many times. I didn't intend to tell this story again. But there may be people here that haven't heard it. I know my comrades at the back are bored of it. But I saw that wonderful man up there, Tom Watson, a moment ago. And I waved to him from the chair. I didn't use all my fingers, but I did wave. And I apologise if you heard this story, but I think it's an important one to actually tell you about the people that run or are attempting to run our country. Certainly someone that's attempting to run the Labour Party, albeit from, speed talk. But very, very quickly then, I didn't realise I didn't have that much time. Okay, Tom. Tom met me after I became president earlier in the year, and Angela Eagle and others there. They were drinking. I was doing a dry month, which I do every now and again to save my liver. And the whole debate was about when is the RMT coming back to their homeland of the Labour Party. And why I put up with it, well, thanks, I just went up. This is great. I can add in the Angela Eagle bit now. Because Angela had the microphone there and she was saying at the time, RMT, when are you going to come back to your family? And I pointed out earlier and I said then, well, if it's a family, I actually got it wrong because I said, well, we're the abused child. But of course, the RMT formed the Labour Party, or what became the Labour Party, not on our own, but we were part of that movement. And here we were all them years later dealing as the parent with the disappointment of a child. And I messed that up a bit, but I told you earlier, and those of you who are up in the other meeting heard all that, and I'm not going to go down that line again. But back to Tom. So Tom then decides he wants to be my mate. So he's like, come on, Sean, he pretended he knew me. He didn't know anything about me. Someone else had just told him who I was. And so he's then, really keen to get to know me. And I said, well, I'm not drinking, Tom. He wanted to go for a drink. he said, well, next month we'll go for a drink. I'll give you my details. Our office will contact you. We'll go for a drink, get to know each other, and then maybe the RMT could start talking about coming back. I just said, Tom, let's get to know each other now. And there were a few people around us. And I said, I'll start the ball rolling, Tom, if I want to get to know you. Tom, there were 9 countries bombing Syria when you voted for us to be the 10th. Tom, had the 9 countries missed a bit? Because if they'd missed a bit, Tom, we need to damn well get in there and get the bit that the other 9 missed, don't we, Tom? Well, unbelievably, everybody's phones must have been going off at the same time. They all started picking their phones out and wandering off. It's a long... I will say, he did try to justify his position, and I ended it with, it's bad enough you did it, but actually trying to justify it as well, to me, that was quite sick. But moving on from there... That was early days. I didn't particularly like him then, and it hasn't got any better. And what do we see moving on from there? Middle of our AGM, 172 treacherous MPs trying to do Jeremy in. 172. Tom pulling the strings in the background. Harp, other people, he's unelectable. He's unelectable. He's going to damage the party. I think, yeah, exactly. I think I remember the Labour, I don't remember, but I've read this. I'm not this old. But 1945 election, weeks before the election, a landslide under the Clement Attlee Labour Party, Harold Litsky, the chairman of Labour, sent a letter telling Clement Attlee to resign because you're going to gravely damage our chance of victory. So it's all happened before. And is that the 5 or the 2?
2 minutes left.
And that makes 7. And then we roll the clock forward, and only the other week, 102 Labour MPs either abstained or did not vote on a bill that was trying to stop arms being traded with Saudi Arabia to bomb the Yemen. Now, this is what we're up against. This is the Labour Party that I'm talking about. So that's why I'm not the most enthusiastic when we talk about how we can work with them. Of course I want to work with Jeremy, John and others. These are all people the RMT have worked with for an awful long time. These are good people. And there are a lot of good people, there are good people and good socialists in the Green Party, for instance, but it's not a Socialist Party. There are good people and there are some socialists in the Labour Party, but the Parliamentary Labour Party, you cannot change it. It is a party that is corrupt and you cannot change it. So, very quickly, I do want to just talk about what's going on in my union at the moment. We've had 50 ballots for strike action this year. I'm not proud of that. I'm not bragging about it. That shows you the fight we're in. That shows you what our members are up against. In Southern, they're not fighting for money. All they're fighting for in Southern is to make the railway safe for the public. That's all they want. And yet the government are hell-bent on removing the safety-critical guard from every train. And then they want to do it in every other train around the country. Why? They've worked out they can save £20 billion. Wrong phrase. Not save. Collect £20 billion off the public to give to the privateers. That's what they're trying to do there. We've got the Adelphi Hotel in Liverpool at the moment. The staff there, minimum wage, 0 hours contracts. We've just started a new campaign to save our seafarers. And even that, we've got people sailing out of Portsmouth to the Canary Islands, to the Channel Islands. I wish it was Canary Islands. Okay, £2.45 an hour, wholly in our waters. It's all legal. These are the battles we're up against. Now, I had loads. We'll have to wait to the bar. Listen, we have got many battles ahead of us. Many, many battles. And those of us that are left behind after the loss of Bob Crow, we're doing our best to try and live up to the man that Bob Crow was, live up to the values he had, and the RMT is still a strong, militant, fighting trade union. And all the time I'm around, I will strive to make sure nothing changes. And as Bob used to say, when we're in this fight, and I'll always use Bob's lines, that if you spit on your own, they just wipe it away. But if we all spit together, we can drown the bastards.
Thank you very much for that, Sean. privileged to be welcoming our next guest, who has travelled here from Madrid to be with us tonight. Juan Ignacio Ramos is the General Secretary of Izquierda Revolucionaria, or the IR, in Spain. Over the last month, the Spanish state has been convulsed by a wave of resistance, with protests against the formation of a right-wing PP government. But the dam first burst on the 26th of October, when a strike of 2 million school students took place. This had been organised by the Sindicato Estudiantes, which is an organisation that IR members play a leading role in, and I was very privileged to be on the march with them in Spain a few months ago. The IR and the Committee for the Workers' International, which the Socialist Party is affiliated to, have been collaborating very closely in the recent period. So I really hope that everyone will be able to offer Juan Ignacio an extremely warm welcome.
Os podéis imaginar la enorme emoción que siento de poder dirigirme a todos vosotros y vosotras.
You can imagine how emotional it makes me to be able to speak to all of you.
Es para nosotros un reencuentro histórico, este gran acto.
This for us is a historic re-encountering, this great rally.
Hace 24 años que nos separamos,
24 years ago we separated,
pero parece que solamente han pasado 24 días.
but it seems like it's only been 24 days.
Y esto... Queremos también trasladaros en primer lugar un mensaje de solidaridad y apoyo revolucionario, internacionalista de todos los miembros de Izquierda Revolucionaria en el Estado español, en Venezuela y en México.
So first of all, we want to bring to you a message of revolutionary support, revolutionary solidarity from all the members of Revolutionary Left in Spain and also in Mexico and Venezuela.
Y un reconocimiento, un tributo a la enorme campaña de solidaridad que habéis realizado en todos los rincones del planeta, todos los camaradas del CID, con la gran huelga general estudiantil del pasado 26 de octubre, que nos ha llenado de orgullo, nos ha llenado de entusiasmo y también ha demostrado el tipo de organización que sois, una organización revolucionaria e insobornable.
And so we want to also start by paying a tribute and a great recognition of the amazing campaign of international solidarity, active solidarity in all the different corners of the planet, which the Socialist Party and the CWI organised with the great general strike of students on the 26th of October. And this campaign filled us with pride, and it also showed what type of organisation the CWI and the Socialist Party is, which is a revolutionary organisation and a serious organisation.
Hace 80 años, León Trotsky explicó que el capitalismo había perdido su equilibrio interno.
80 years ago, Leon Trotsky explained that capitalism had lost its internal equilibrium.
80 años después podemos decir que el capitalismo ha perdido su equilibrio interno.
And 80 years later, we can say the same thing.
La base material del sistema está recorrida por contradicciones que no puede solucionar.
The material basis of the entire system is living through big contradictions that it's not able to solve.
La explosión de la crisis de sobreproducción del año 2007-2008 no ha terminado.
The explosion of the economic crisis, the crisis of overproduction of 2007-2008, that still has not ended.
Hay un trastorno general en las relaciones mundiales.
There's a total turning over of the world relations.
La llamada paz, prosperidad y democracia de los apologistas del capitalismo están dando paso a una guerra cruel tras guerra cruel en muchas zonas del planeta.
The so-called peace and prosperity that the apologists of capitalism described in the last period, that's given way to a new period of wars and brutal wars in some parts of the world.
Países enteros están siendo reducidos a escombros.
Entire countries are being reduced to ashes.
La mancha de la desigualdad social y económica se extiende por todo el mundo.
The stain of inequality is extending throughout the whole world.
Una polarización política y social desconocida en décadas.
A huge social and political polarization not seen in decades.
Crisis de la democracia burguesa.
A Crisis of bourgeois democracy.
crisis de los partidos de la derecha tradicional,
Crisis of the traditional right-wing parties.
crisis de la socialdemocracia,
Crisis of social democracy.
fenómenos como los de Trump,
Phenomenons like Donald Trump.
elementos de contrarrevolución.
Elements of
Pero eso es
counter-revolution.
una cara de la moneda.
But that's only one side of the coin.
La otra cara es el movimiento de las masas,
The other side of the coin is the mass movement.
la rebelión de la clase obrera y de la juventud en todo el mundo.
The rebellion of the working class and the youth in the whole world.
Y en el Estado español, el ejemplo de nuestros camaradas estadounidenses de Socialist Alternative.
The example that's being given by our US comrades of Socialist Alternative.
Pocas horas,
In a few hours,
una organización es capaz de movilizar a decenas de miles.
that an organization like that can mobilize tens of thousands.
Si nosotros fuéramos la dirección del movimiento obrero en Estados Unidos, en el Estado español, ¿qué no seríamos capaces de hacer?
Imagine if we were the leadership of the workers' movement in the United States. Imagine we were the leadership of the workers' movement in Spain. Imagine what we could do.
Hay una auténtica oleada de furia y de descontento contra el sistema capitalista.
There's a huge wave of fury and of discontent with the system.
En el Estado español hemos visto un cambio histórico en toda la situación política.
That in Spain we've seen a historic change in the whole situation.
Hay un punto de inflexión.
It's a turning point.
El régimen capitalista español que se fragó sobre la traición a la Revolución Española en los años 70 está en crisis.
The capitalist regime of Spain is a regime that was created on the basis of a betrayal of a revolutionary situation in the 1970s, and that's all unraveling.
Aquellos estalinistas, socialdemócratas, que se auparon sobre los hombros de la clase obrera, sobre la sangre de la clase obrera para pactar con los herederos de la dictadura, hoy están en crisis.
All those Stalinists, all those social democrats, they stood on the shoulders of the working class, only in order to sell them out in the betrayal. They are now in crisis.
El bipartidismo está en crisis.
The two-party system is in crisis.
La burguesía ha tenido que dar un golpe de Estado dentro del Partido Socialista para garantizar la investidura de un reaccionario como Rajoy.
The bourgeoisie had to carry out a coup within the Socialist Party in order to make Rajoy the president.
Menudo negocio que han hecho.
But what result they have had?
Están destruyendo uno de los pilares fundamentales de la estabilidad capitalista en el Estado español.
Because in doing that, they're destroying one of the fundamental pillars of capitalist stability in Spain.
Pero no van a impedir que haya una nueva oleada de luchas de masas en el Estado español.
And doing that, they will not avoid a new wave of mass struggles in Spain.
Fijaros en la profundidad del cambio.
Think about how deep the change has been.
Una organización
An organization
que hace 2 años no existía,
which 2 years ago didn't exist
formada por exdirigentes estalinistas,
and was set up by ex-members of Stalinists, ex-Stalinists,
como es Podemos,
Podemos,
en cuestión de 1 año y medio,
in just a year and a half.
ha arrancado la mitad de la base electoral al Partido Socialista y a Izquierda Unida.
It took half the social electoral base of the Socialist Party and of Izquierda Unida.
5 millones de votos.
5 million votes.
Es un terremoto político extraordinario.
It's a political earthquake.
Como en Estados Unidos fue el movimiento de Bernie Sanders.
Like the Bernie Sanders movement in the United States.
Nosotros somos marxistas,
We're Marxists.
no somos doctrinarios.
We're not doctrinary.
Vemos al movimiento obrero tal cual es.
We see the workers' movement as it is.
Vemos el proceso de toma de conciencia tal cual es.
We see the development of consciousness as it is.
Sus avances y sus retrocesos.
Both its steps forward and its steps backwards.
Pero camaradas, en el Estado español,
But comrades in Spain,
la base de todos estos procesos
the basis of all these political
es
processes
un profundo y colosal giro a la izquierda entre la clase obrera y la juventud.
is a deep, a colossal shift to the left amongst the working class and amongst the youth.
Los medios de información capitalista cumplen una función muy concreta:
The capitalist media play a very concrete role.
arrojar arena a los ojos de los oprimidos,
They try and throw sand in the eyes of the working class.
mentir,
They lie.
ocultar la realidad.
They hide the reality.
En el Estado español hemos vivido una rebelión de masas que ha tenido elementos incluso prerevolucionarios en estos últimos 4 años.
In the last 4 years, we've seen mass movements in Spain, including with some pre-revolutionary elements.
El levantamiento de los indignados, el 15M,
The uprising of the indignados,
2 huelgas generales en el año 2012,
2 general strikes in 1 year in 2012,
una marcha por la dignidad convocada contra las burocracias de los sindicatos con más de 1 millón de personas en Madrid en marzo de 2014, perdón.
a march for dignity which was called against the bureaucracies and the leaderships of the trade unions that grouped together more than 1 million people in Madrid in March 2014.
La consigna de esa manifestación evocaba la Revolución Rusa de 1917. Su lema fue pan, techo y trabajo.
And the main slogan of that demonstration, it harked back to the history of the Russian Revolution. It was bread, housing and work.
Un movimiento que ha desafiado a la burocracia de la socialdemocracia y de los sindicatos,
There's been a movement that's challenged the bureaucracy in the social democracy and in the trade unions.
que ha mostrado un enorme nivel, una enorme conciencia. Consignas como la nacionalización de la banca, la expropiación de los pisos en manos de los bancos han dominado el movimiento durante años.
And it's featured slogans coming from below, like for the nationalization of the banks, for the expropriation of housing in order to provide for social need. They've been present in the struggle in the last few years.
Y los marxistas hemos cumplido con nuestro deber.
And the Marxists, we've played our role as well.
No nos hemos quedado observando los acontecimientos.
We haven't just stayed observing the developments.
No somos como algunos pequeños burgueses que conocéis muy bien aquí en Gran Bretaña.
Not like some of the petty bourgeoisie that you must know very well in Britain as well.
Que nosotros lamentablemente también hemos conocido.
That unfortunately we've also known the same people.
Pero como dijo Trotsky,
But as Trotsky said,
la historia es más importante que cualquier secretario general,
history is more important than any general secretary,
o que cualquier pequeño burgués arrogante y egocéntrico.
or more important than any kind of arrogant and egocentric petty bourgeois.
No hacemos marxismo académico.
We don't do academic Marxism.
Somos militantes luchando por la construcción de un partido revolucionario.
We're militants and we struggle for the building of a revolutionary
Y
party.
hemos intervenido en el movimiento con nuestros puntos de apoyo.
And we've intervened in the movement with our
En
basic
primer
support.
lugar, entre la juventud.
First of all, in the youth.
Fijaros qué cambio en la situación.
Imagine the change in the situation.
El sindicato de estudiantes
The Students' Union
es la organización dirigida por nosotros, por Izquierda Revolucionaria, por los marxistas en el Estado español.
and it's an organization that's led by us, by Revolutionary Left, by Marxists.
El pasado 26 de octubre
On the 26th of October,
conquistamos un gran hito.
we had a great achievement.
Por cierto, esto no hubiera sido posible sin estos años de intervención paciente y sistemática dentro del movimiento obrero y entre la juventud.
And of course, none of it would have been possible without the years of patient, of systematic work within the working class and the youth.
No puedes recoger si no siembras.
You can't reap what you don't sow,
Muchas veces siembras mucho.
and sometimes you sow a lot.
Tienes que enfrentarte a muchas dificultades.
You have to face up to many difficulties.
Tienes que nadar contra la corriente.
You have to swim against the stream.
Pero así se mide el carácter revolucionario de un partido.
But that's how you measure the revolutionary character of a party.
Cuando las circunstancias cambian
When the circumstances
y el
change
factor subjetivo puede salir hacia adelante,
and the subjective factor can come forward,
toda la situación se transforma
the whole situation is
de arriba abajo.
from top to bottom.
Nosotros convocamos una movilización en defensa de la educación pública y contra una agresión brutal del gobierno del Partido Popular.
We call the mobilization against the attacks on public education and against the brutal attack by the PP government.
Quieren volver a la enseñanza pública que teníamos bajo la dictadura franquista.
They want to go back to the education system that we had in the Franco dictatorship,
Eliminar el derecho de los jóvenes de la clase trabajadora a poder tener una educación digna.
to eliminate the right of working class young people to have a dignified education.
Y el sindicato de estudiantes,
And the Students' Union,
los marxistas revolucionarios,
the revolutionary Marxists,
con este programa, con estas consignas,
with our program, with our
fuimos
slogans,
capaces de poner en pie de guerra a todos los estudiantes de enseñanza secundaria con una huelga de más de 2 millones de estudiantes en todo el país.
we could bring the students of the country to their feet and have a strike of more than 2 million students.
Más de 200.000 estudiantes en las calles en más de 70 manifestaciones.
More than 200,000 students in more than 70 different marches.
50.000 en Barcelona,
50,000 in Barcelona,
60.000 en Madrid,
60,000 in Madrid,
15.000 en Bilbao.
15,000 in Bilbao.
Contamos con la participación de la camarada Claire.
We had the participation of Claire.
Ella se dirigió a los manifestantes.
She spoke to the demonstration.
Incluso, y es muy importante destacar, el levantamiento también de la juventud de las naciones oprimidas del Estado español.
What we have to underline as well is the uprising that took place of the youth in the oppressed nations of Spain.
Y esto es muy importante porque el sindicato de estudiantes es una organización revolucionaria, internacionalista, que tiene el mismo programa que Izquierda Revolucionaria.
And that's very important because the Students' Union is an organization which has the same revolutionary program as we do.
Imaginaros cómo han cambiado las cosas, que haya cientos de miles de jóvenes que puedan manifestarse detrás de las banderas de este programa socialista.
Now imagine what change there had to be in the situation for that hundreds of thousands of young people to participate in demonstrations on the basis of that program and behind that banner.
En 2 meses se han afiliado más de 3.000 estudiantes al sindicato de estudiantes.
In 2 months, more than 3,000 people have joined the Students' Union.
Hemos construido grupos de activistas del sindicato de estudiantes en más de 500 institutos de secundaria,
We've built active groups of the Students' Union in more than 500 different secondary schools,
en más de 90 facultades universitarias.
in more than 90 university faculties.
Sí, vamos a transformar también ese crecimiento en desarrollar nuestras fuerzas, las fuerzas de izquierda revolucionaria.
And we will translate that growth into the growth of our own forces of revolutionary left.
Se abre una nueva fase de la lucha de clases en el Estado español.
That there's the beginning of a new phase of the class struggle in Spain.
El gobierno de la derecha, ya lo ha dicho, las próximas semanas va a aplicar un recorte de 5.000 millones de euros al gasto social.
The new government, a right-wing government, has already said that in the next months it's going to put forward a cut of 5 billion euros to the public spending.
Pues desde aquí le decimos una cosa a Rajoy.
And we say something to Rajoy,
Se van a estrellar contra un muro
that you're going to hit a wall
de luchas y de movilizaciones que van a recorrer todo el Estado español de norte a sur y de este a oeste.
of struggles, of mobilizations throughout Spain from north to south, east to west.
Pero va a haber una diferencia muy importante, compañeros.
But there'll be a very important difference,
La escuela de estos años no ha pasado en balde.
that the last few years has been a school and it hasn't just passed over people's heads.
Las ilusiones en que el Parlamento lo resuelve todo se han disipado, se están disipando.
The illusions in that the parliament can solve everything, those illusions are being undermined.
El producto de esto también es lo que está ocurriendo dentro de Podemos, la lucha interna que está habiendo dentro de Podemos, que por cierto va a ser mayor y va a tener más consecuencias que incluso la lucha que se ha estado dentro del Partido Socialista.
And one of the reflections of that is the internal struggle and crisis within Podemos. There's an internal struggle taking place within, and that will be even more important than the crisis and struggle which is taking place within the Socialist Party.
Y no os quepa duda de que nosotros también jugaremos el papel que nos corresponde en este proceso,
And we will also struggle to play the role that we have to play in that process.
interviniendo, defendiendo un programa socialista y construyendo las fuerzas del partido.
Intervening with a socialist program and building the party.
Camaradas, tengo que ir terminando.
So I have to finish.
Quiero plantear dos cuestiones al respecto.
Just to touch on 2 questions.
Dicho al principio que hace 24 años nuestros caminos se separaron después de una escisión muy dolorosa.
So as I said at the beginning, 24 years ago, our paths separated in a painful split.
Nosotros, como sección española del CID, iniciamos un nuevo rumbo después de 1992.
And as the Spanish section of the CWI, we went on a different path after 1992.
No hemos perdido el tiempo en estos años.
We didn't just waste time in those years.
Hemos cometido errores,
We made mistakes.
hemos tenido experiencias de todo tipo,
We had many different experiences.
pero hemos demostrado también nuestra fidelidad a la bandera del marxismo
But
revolucionario.
we also continue to show our faith in the flag of revolutionary Marxism.
Como sabéis, hace años rompimos con ese rumbo que iniciamos en 1992.
Now, as you know, years ago, we broke from that new path that we started in 1992.
Sacamos muchas lecciones y muchas conclusiones políticas.
We drew many lessons, many political conclusions.
Y ahora estamos reatando la historia común que nos une.
And now we're retying the knot of the common history that characterizes our organizations. Hemos iniciado un proceso de diálogo, de colaboración y de trabajo militante en común entre ambas organizaciones. We've started a process of discussion, of collaboration, and of joint militant work between the organizations.
Tenemos una gran coincidencia, una enorme coincidencia
We have an enormous common ground
en las ideas,
and ideas,
en los métodos
in the methods,
y en nuestra tradición.
and in our traditions.
Sí, porque nosotros también somos de una tradición.
Because we also come from a tradition.
Somos de la tradición de Militant, de las luchas heroicas del Poll Tax y de Liverpool.
We're from the tradition of militants, the heroic struggles of Volta, Liverpool.
Esas tradiciones están grabadas en el ADN de la sección española.
And those traditions are recorded in the DNA of our organization.
Vemos en vosotros y en todas vosotras camaradas de combate.
And we see in all of you comrades in the struggle.
Y estamos confiados, sinceramente,
And we're very confident
de que el camino que hemos iniciado juntos
that this path that we've started together,
terminará de manera fructífera y positiva.
it will end in a very fruitful, a very positive
Y
way.
que representará un gran paso adelante en la construcción del Partido Mundial de la Revolución Socialista.
And it will represent an important step forward in the building of the World Revolutionary Party.
Camaradas,
Comrades,
¡Viva el Partido Socialista, Socialist Party! ¡Viva Izquierda Revolucionaria!
long live Socialist Party, long live revolutionary.
¡Salud!
Thank you very much for that. One of the things that we seek to do at events like these is to share experiences from the struggles taking place internationally, as we just have, but also from the struggles taking place in working class communities around this country. In particular, we want to share the lessons that we can learn from victories, to give confidence to others to follow these examples. So our next speaker, I believe, is going to be joined by some friends, so who are going to come up as well. She is one of the tenants, so I think a few more are coming up, of the Butterfield Estate in Northern Forest. I'll let Anna tell her
Good evening, everybody. I know we are all involved in many battles to protect our jobs, to protect our homes, to ensure our kids' education and future. And I'm here tonight to testify that if you fight, you have a chance to win. We together achieved a great victory just a few weeks ago. We won back our homes. I live in Butterfield, a little estate in Walthamstow, whose flats had been sold from a charity company to an aggressive developer who wanted to resell them as vacant to make the maximum profit. We faced eviction for 10 months. We have been threatened to become homeless. We faced intimidation and bullying. But we decided to fight. We decided not to budge. And our lovely Linda and Nancy Tuff, together with other amazing members of the Socialist Party, embraced our cause. They helped us to organize our battle. They led our marches. They raised our voice through the media. They sought and obtained political attention. They wiped out our tears when we lost our hope, encouraging us to hold on together and resist. And we won. We won 49 off of 63 flats, which have been sold to Dolphin Housing Association. None of the tenants who have stayed this far will have to move. We are celebrating our victory together, and I really hope we can all celebrate together the victory of many other battles.
very much, Anna. We are now going to move on to the first of our two keynote speakers of the evening. For many of you, our next speaker needs very little introduction. Peter is the General Secretary of the Socialist Party, and he has dedicated his life to building the socialist movement and to this organisation specifically. Peter was one of the members of the militant editorial board who were expelled from the Labour Party in 1983 for fighting for socialist ideas. He has hit the headlines over the weekend because he is one of the 75 who is now applying to rejoin. So with a fresh battle being waged for the soul of the Labour Party and in a turbulent political time, I'm sure you're all eagerly awaiting his contribution. So please welcome Peter Tam.
Comrade Chair and comrades, I hope I can see you all. You can see me. It takes me back to the days of the Albert Hall when it was also almost like a musical hall, so to speak. But how can you follow the marvellous contributions that we've had at this rally this evening and you're yet to hear Darletta? This is, and by the way, that's worthwhile waiting for. The US and the world woke up on Wednesday, as Claire said, to a political earthquake, with the victory of Donald Trump in the US presidential elections. And we've become used, haven't we, to earthquakes in Britain, at least in the last period. The Scottish referendum, the election result, the last general election, Brexit, and which Donald Trump drew on and characterised his victory as Brexit as plus, plus, plus. But this is in the biggest country in the world, the strongest capitalist economy, and will have enormous repercussions in the next period throughout the world. And the central question, which has been partly touched on already, which we are asking at this meeting tonight, why is it that a misogynist, a racist bigot, a representative of big business par excellence, was allowed to come to power and use the enormous powers of the presidency on behalf of his programme? And the simple interest is because his opponent, Hillary Clinton, stood for more of the same. And the more of the same was a continuation of capitalist policy. She was the candidate of Wall Street and Walmart when the American population in the great majority had suffered steady but decisive decline in living standards in the last period. In fact, a decline in the overall position since the Obama regime was in power. The result is 60% of the American population believe that their standard of living has gone through the floor. And moreover, contrary to the past, when the ruling class inculcated or attempted to inculcate into the population of America the idea that they weren't workers, that they were middle class, that I confronted when I went to the US 20 years ago, that now has been utterly destroyed by the crisis of capitalism. Because more and more workers consider themselves, if you like, as a class in itself. Perhaps not yet, as Karl Marx said, a class of itself. And Donald Trump reflected a trend in American history of populism, right-wing populism. But there have also been examples of left-wing populism as well. In the case of Bernie Sanders, for instance, but Donald Trump represented populism. And what did that signify? You had in the 19th century, for instance, you had the working class in an alliance with small farmers, not yet a developed class consciousness. That only developed in the mighty movement that developed in the early part of the 20th century with the explosive development of the labor movement. And why do we have populism today? Not just in the US, by the way. What we've seen in America, unfortunately, could be repeated in a number of European countries because of the role of the trade union and Labour leadership itself. It was disgraceful that this vile billionaire, Trump, was able to posture as a representative of the working class. His last broadcast before American workers went to vote was to appeal to the working class. What a disgrace and what a condemnation of the leaders of the Democratic Party, of the leaders of the trade unions in America, who haven't given a lead to workers who are reaching out for us. The real working class and the youth were behind Bernie Sanders in his campaign. They were yearning for real change. But unfortunately, when he didn't get the Democratic nomination, he quite wrongly abandoned his previous position and lined up behind discredited Hillary Clinton. And the result was a triumph for the right and a triumph for Trump. And isn't there a lesson for us that was partly touched on before? Don't compromise with the right. Don't build up, as unfortunately some around Jeremy Corbyn are doing. Don't try and seek a compromise with the Blairites. Drive them out of the Labour movement. They belong to the discredited forces that gave us tuition fees, privatisation through the PFI, and the near destruction of the NHS at the present time. Introduce immediately, if necessary, an emergency motion on the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party to organise a special conference, don't wait for next year, in which mandatory reselection will be put on the agenda and the constitution of the Labour Party. And even if that results in a smaller mass socialist Labour Party, that would be preferable to the confusion that reigns at the present time. But that would not necessarily be the case. If Labour went on an anti-austerity programme and combined that with the socialist measures, appealed to the students to cancel the debt, appealed to the Buttersfields workers and the workers in London and elsewhere, and say we'll immediately introduce security of tenure. And we will also have committees that will regulate the rents in the private sector. And when you say, well, this won't appeal to the American workers, what did our comrades in Seattle do? We were told socialism is a doctrine that's alien to the American working class. Even Tariq Ali, when he discussed with our comrades who stands on the left, said when we approached him to discuss and what the position was in the US, he said, well, Socialist Alternative are very good at elections. Yes, we are. But we're much more than that. We put out a socialist message, and what was the result? The election of a socialist councillor for the first time in 100 years. This is the real lessons of the American elections. Be bold. Appeal to young people. This is what Socialist Alternative and the Socialist Party is all about. And use a bit of imagination here. Imagine if Saunders had used his campaign for a new departure for the American working class. And when Hillary Clinton was elected, said, right, I'm going to organise a new party, a third party, in a short period of time. That would have got massive response amongst the American working class. Possibly he could have won, according to opinion polls, on the basis of that stand. At the very least, he would have taken millions of workers away from Trump, and then you would have had a Hillary Clinton government coming to power. This would have established a priceless basis for the development of a new party. It's incredible and nauseating to witness at the same time the way that Trump has been able to appeal to the most downtrodden in America, and he has. with a message that's appealing to say, we will solve your problems. And he's announced in the last couple of days that he will introduce a crash building program in relation to a new stimulus program, a bit like the New Deal. Now, there's enormous obstacles to that. Why hasn't the Labour movement offered a program of that character, winning the working class to its position? In effect, the program of the Democrats, of Obama, of both wings of the ruling class in America, has led to a disaster, an industrial disaster for the American people. We have now, unfortunately, in the light of Trump's victory, some commentators, even on the left, drawing the conclusion, well, the lights are going out over Europe and the world with a Trump victory. We do not estimate for one moment the damage that this man can do to the living standards of the working class, can reinforce racism, misogyny, and the rest of it. But nevertheless, we have to have a sense of proportion. It's not featured in the press, but Trump actually lost in the popular vote. Only the vagaries of the American system, if you like, in relation to the Electoral College, that goes back to the period when it was formed 2 centuries ago, and is not fit for purpose in the modern world expressing the views of the people. Also, he got less of the vote than George Bush did in 2004, or even the defeated candidate of the Republicans in the last presidential election, Mitt Romney himself. And this is all against the background of capitalism falling apart at the seams. It hasn't recovered from the devastating crisis of the world collapse of 2007 and 8. 8.8 million workers were sacked in the US in the aftermath of 2008. That's more than the population of the whole of Ireland. In other words, a whole country was sacked, if you like, within the framework of the US itself. 1.2 million were sacked in Britain. And that doesn't even describe the 40, 50, and 60% of the population unemployed in countries in Eastern Europe who've actually suffered a depression. Capitalism, its defenders say, is a machine for creating wealth. And in the past, we concede. It's created some of the wonders of the world, one of which is the Liverpool docks, and I was there last week. But now this 7 miles of docks is a museum. And they have a museum on the docks as well. And it's not a very good museum. Because in that museum, it's supposed to be a museum of Labour history. And there's one little cabinet devoted to the battles of the 47 between 1983 and 1987, who created 5,000 houses, who built sports centres, who created wonderful conditions for the working people of Merseyside because they faced down Thatcher and they inflicted a defeat on Thatcher. And they are rewarded by a little cabinet with the official overcoat of John Hamilton, who was the leader of the cabinet, and a leaflet describing the movement of the 47. And you know, Marxists always say the memory of the working class is in its parties. And a reformist party is a party of short memories. When it comes to the Blairites, it's of no memories at all. When it comes to us, we are the memory of the working class. And we evoke the example of Liverpool, as Juan Ignacio has done in his tremendous speech, particularly against the background that this week Joe Anderson, the leader of the council, has announced that the Liverpool working class have a choice between a massive increase in the council tax or the whole of the library system, and other cuts will take place. That's like choosing between death by poisoning and the firing squad. And that's being put forward by a Labour council, yes, a Labour council in Liverpool. And unfortunately, Jeremy and Bernie Sanders have attempted to resurrect dead organisations. It's like the task for Lazarus to try and rescue the Democratic Party in America. It may take time, but it's dead. And we have the outline of a new movement and a new party developing. The Blairite Labour Party is dead, but it refuses to lie down. And that's the problem that we face in Britain at this particular time. And when people say to us, but don't we need the right wing? Don't we need the Blairites? After all, they were responsible for 3 electoral victories. And I would say, what were these victories? Yes, we had nominal Labour governments. They were in office, but they weren't in power. They were the best governments that the ruling class could have at that stage. Apart from a few reforms, Blair and Brown initiated the infamous attacks on the NHS, introduced tuition fees, which is crippling our youth today. And by the way, in his biography, he actually admitted that the Labour government could have been brought down by the movement that took place in and around tuition fees. That's a very good example for us with the youth today to engage in struggle. And we have a symmetry between the leaders of the Democratic Party and the leaders of the Labour Party. And the disgusting statement made by Bill Clinton carried in the Guardian this week when he was speaking a few months ago. And he said in that secret speech that was leaked, he said the British Labour Party have taken as their leader some guy off the streets. How terrible that is, because only he and Tony Blair and the aristocratic elite have the right to rule, and that's what it comes down to, the right to represent working people. Well, next year, we will be celebrating the Russian Revolution. And as Leon Trotsky pointed out, what did the Russian Revolution signify? It signified the guy off the street, the factory worker, the commissionaire, all the representatives of working people who rose up and took the power, and yes, were ministers in a workers' government itself. That shows the unbridgeable chasm there is between us and people like Clinton, Blair, and the right wing of the Labour Party itself. And as Sean pointed out, it was shown in that action of theirs to vote in the House of Commons, 100 Labour MPs either absented themselves or voted in favour or voted against the motion, which was a Labour motion that was trying to ban sales to Saudi Arabia that had been used against the poor Yemenis in that civil war. It was a mass revolt against the right, an insurgency which dragged Jeremy Corbyn out of the obscurity of Islington North and up on their shoulders as Labour leaders. Bernie Sanders went through the same kind of evolution. Bernie Sanders at least called for a political revolution, which is a step forward. We said that should be filled out with an economic and a social revolution, including the taking over of the commanding heights of the economy, the monopolies that dominate capitalism at this stage. The opportunity has been missed temporarily, but new opportunities will be developed in the next period. The Labour Party is at a crossroads now. It's at a decisive moment. When Jeremy Corbyn was elected, and we helped to elect him, especially in the work that we did in the trade unions, we approached Momentum and we said, look, we'd like to join and like to participate in this struggle. But the leader of Momentum, John Lansman, said to myself and Hannah Sell, but you are revolutionaries. Yes, we are revolutionaries. You're resolutionaries. And there's a big difference, by the way. And he said, but we want social democracy. I said, good luck. Go tell me anywhere with social democracy has worked. The idea of piecemeal reform within the framework of capitalism. It's been discredited in Spain. In Greece, it led to the betrayal of Cyprus. There's nowhere in the world where social democracy has worked. And then Paul Mason, who debated with me on television, then comes out in favour of progressive capitalism, of Trotsky should link up with the City of London in a campaign against the forces of evil. Well, we have to say to Paul Mason, get your magnifying glass out and go and look for this progressive capitalism. Because you won't find it in Britain, you won't find it in America, you certainly won't find it in Spain. Comrades, we've made an offer to the leadership of the Labour Party that we would like to join the Labour Party, but I have to add, not at any price. We've also sent a petition with a combined 1,000 years membership of the Labour Party. That's like going back to 1066. Not that we've been members for that time, but that's the combined membership of those who've been expelled from the Labour Party and others. And it's absolutely necessary to bring together the genuine forces to fight the battle to come. We could have a general election as early as next year. Theresa may be forced, because of the decision of the High Court, to go for the general election where Brexit will be at issue. And Corbyn and MacDonald and the Labour leadership made a big blunder when they went behind the Remain campaign. You could have fought for a real opposition to Brexit like you did with us, Jeremy, in 1975, when we marched together and we fought together on a class and an internationalist position. Now, unfortunately, he was forced into this position. And we have a very confused situation that's developing at the present time. I don't have the time to develop that, so I'll end on this note. We have sent out appeal to Jeremy Corbyn. We read in the press in the last couple of days, and Michael Crick no doubt will go into it in the debate that he has with us tomorrow. We're really looking forward to a democratic and an open debate and an exchange of views in relation to the future of the Labour Party. But he's already tweeted and said, we'll be turned down. And he's already said, well, in Unite there are forces who are saying that the Socialist Party will not be able to join. We'll see about that. Once the discussion and the debate, and we're not just going to the top, we're going to the base of the unions and the Labour Party. Why? We are outside of the Labour Party. We've had a phenomenal effect on the Labour Party since this issue came up. And I'll make another point here. If in the end Jeremy Corbyn capitulates to the right and excludes us from the Labour Party, he'll be signing his own political death warrant. Because there's no way you can mollify the right. In a civil war, weakness invites aggression. A fight to the finish, drive them out of the movement, and let's create a new, broad socialist movement. But if in the end we are excluded from the Labour Party, that's not a tragedy. You see, we represent a trend, a political trend. This party has been involved in many battles. And in Liverpool, we had very limited support who were dragged kicking and screaming into supporting the Liverpool working class in that struggle. In the poll tax struggle, we even had illusions that we could get the Labour Party to come with us, and they deserted the field of battle. We then appealed to the trade union leaders, and they left the field of battle. The SWP didn't even enter on the field of battle. But we went to the working class. And as with our comrades in Spain, and we can call them our comrades now, in the marvellous school student struggle, we went to the working class and we organised a movement of 18 million people who refused to pay the poll tax. It wasn't Neil Kinnock. It wasn't the General Council of the TUC. It wasn't a little left group on the outskirts of the movement. It was militants that mobilised this movement that defeated Thatcher not once but twice in Liverpool and in Hong And therefore we will continue the battles of Buttersfields wherever they take place, of the struggles of workers in the factories as Chris has taken place, of our international comrades in the school students movement and in our brother and sister party in Spain that we were discussing with. I will be going to speak at a rally of theirs next weekend itself. This is a new beginning. It's a retying of the knot of history. It's a very important symbol that socialism is international or it's nothing. We are now in an era where capitalism on the one side is falling apart at the seams, and there's never been more necessary to carry the message of socialism to working people who are involved in struggle. At the same time, to create a common international organisation that can fight for influence amongst the working class, that can create mass parties that are worthy of the working class, are worthy of the rail workers, and those workers who are suffering under the heel of the landlord or the boss or the capitalist system as a whole. We are the party that will go to the end in the struggle against capitalism. We've shown it. 34 of our comrades were jailed during the poll tax struggle itself. I have not paid the poll tax to this day. I've fallen off the scales, if you like. And if we approach our work in this fashion, as has been already illustrated on this platform, we will create a mighty force, a spinal column of mass organisations that will organise and educate and prepare the working class for the 21st century, which will be a century of struggle, does not belong to the Trumps or to all the other capitalist gang, but belongs to the working people, that will abolish once and for all from this planet unemployment, poverty, racism, and all the other iniquities of capitalism, and establish a world democratic socialist federation. Thank you.
Thank you to Peter for that excellent contribution. I'd now like to hand over the stage to Judy Beeshan. Judy is a leading member of the Socialist Party's Executive Committee and is the editor of the Socialist Party's website. And she's going to be carrying out a very important appeal, so please give her your full attention.
Thanks, Claire, and hello, everyone. The theme of this rally this evening is socialism back on the agenda, and you can now give that agenda a very powerful kick forward, because this collection, over just the next 10 minutes in fact, has the prospect of being the biggest single financial collection for the promotion of socialist ideas in an entire year, in fact, in Britain. It's the part of the rally where you can turn all your anger at the rottenness that you see daily in the capitalist system into a concrete contribution towards building an alternative.
I'm sure that many of you are very eagerly awaiting and anticipating our final speaker of the night. Darletta Scruggs is an activist, a campaigner, and a member of Socialist Alternative, who are our co-thinkers in the United States. She is perhaps the perfect antidote to all of the doom and gloom that has filled our pages of newspapers and the television screens over the days following on from the election. Darletta has come all the way from Chicago to be with us tonight. She is a Black Lives Matter activist, and she came to prominence recently when a video of her taking on Fox News, in which she was arguing for free education, went viral around the world. So, among other things, I'm sure we're all very eager to hear about the struggles that are already developing in the States against the newly elected Donald Trump. Please give an enormously warm welcome to Darletta Scruggs.
I've been told to stick to time, so I'm going to try my best to do so. I'm very honored to be here. I almost didn't make it because I forgot to turn off my militancy when I got in Dublin at the immigration checkpoint. So I'm actually glad to be here. You can imagine how annoyed when the immigration officer asked me how much money I had, and I said I had $130, and he said he was concerned because that's not enough money. So me being poor is a reason for not entry into another country. But before I start, I want to take the time to really acknowledge the work that our comrades are doing, because it just shows the power of our ideas, that we all come from a different thread in society, but we are woven together by the common ideas of revolutionary socialist ideas. And I think the work is very inspiring for me and for our comrades in the US, so I think we should give them another round of applause. I hope when I'm Peter Taft's age, I'm still kicking and screaming and yelling down with capitalism. Comrades, friends, in the US, we are seeing the US capitalist imperialist war machine breaking right before our eyes, and it gives me great pleasure to be here. What we see is the global crisis of capitalism happening all around the world. Particularly, we saw 3 banks issue a red alert with the impending crisis looming ahead. And what we can see is that the US is no longer seen as the free and democratic society that has to go around the world and save everyone and instill democracy. We are seeing the true reality of the limitations of capitalism in relation to providing the needs of everyday working people. And what we can see with the rise of Trump was absolutely the failure of the capitalist machine, but also the failure of the Democrats in providing an answer to the anger and frustration that working class people are experiencing. What we can see is the failure of 8 years of Obama, who rode the hope and gravy train, who promised economic growth and deliver freedom. But what he has done during his presidency is nothing but issue neoliberal policies and cuts to crucial social programs. What I like to say is Obama swag surfed neoliberalism for 8 years, untouched and unchecked. But the Democrats are going to reap what they sow, and they're experiencing the reality of the fact that they have failed the working class. What we've seen with Hillary and the exposing of the WikiLeaks, with the Democratic Party being tied to Wall Street and imperialist powers like Saudi Arabia and Israel, that they had no connection with the needs of working people and the wants of working people. What we saw in relation to the environment, because I thought that was an important point that was brought up, that Hillary Clinton tells to environmental activists to get lost. That's what she says to speeches to rich billionaire elites. Environmental activists can get lost. That was a choice that voters had between a racist, insane, I'm going to try not to curse so much, but at some point I am, Trump, and someone who thinks that environmental destruction is something to shoo away like a fly, get lost. And that was exposed with the results of the election, with people who are frustrated and didn't decide to turn up. 46% of voters did not even vote in this election. That's not even including those who have been structured out of the voting system altogether. Now, what have we seen after this outrageous and very shocking victory of Donald Trump? We have seen the Democrats and the corporate media struggle to consolidate power and to quell the frustration. We're seeing Democrat after Democrat lining up behind Trump, saying that they're eager to work with him. Obama says he's hardened by what he heard when he had a conversation with Donald Trump, and that he feels that Donald Trump genuinely cares about America. Well, this is confusing. Imagine how confusing that is when for an entire year We've been sold the idea that Bernie Sanders' platform was too radical and that Trump was a threat, so we had to support Hillary. For an entire year, we were told that we had to defeat Trump, therefore we had to support the corporate-backed Wall Street candidate, war hawk Hillary Clinton. And now we're being told, well, you know what, we didn't really mean that, he's not so bad, just calm down, it's gonna be all right. I mean, it's outrageous. But it's not. Really, the fear was never Trump. What they fear is the potential of socialist ideas being on the rise. What they fear is people being empowered, a frustration of seeing that the electoral process in the US is rigged and it doesn't reflect the interests and the needs of working people, and that voting is not enough, and that people need to get in the streets. That scares the ruling class more than anything. They are scared of a united movement because for so long, they have used the tool of racism, of sexism, of homophobia and transphobia, of xenophobia, the threat of terrorism and foreign entities coming into our country and threatening democracy. They have used as a tool to advance capitalist interests. And right now, those tools are breaking down right before their eyes. I had the opportunity last night to go on BBC, and that was interesting. And I had the opportunity to debate a Democratic apologist, liberal Thomas Frank. But I want to talk about the Republican strategist that I had the opportunity to have a conversation with, Rick Wilson, who was advocating that the Republican Party is a party for working people and that they need to go back to their angel roots. They cut that part out too, because you can imagine what my response was. But what I saw, he got so frustrated that he called me a red diaper baby because I was presenting genuine ideas, and to the Republicans and right wing, genuine socialist Marxist ideas like kryptonite. They don't know what to do, so they just panic and then they shout things. So he said I was a red diaper baby. Well, I want to respond to him because I didn't get a chance to, because BBC at that point cut me off. But he's going to be very shocked to know that I am not a red diaper baby, and that 2 years ago, I had no idea what socialism was and what capitalism was or anything. And now 2 years later, I have the opportunity to win people over to socialist ideas. They believe. They believe that in order for someone to be revolutionary, that they had to have somehow just been told it or they were born into it, that you can't come to these ideas on your own. I will tell Rick Wilson that I myself am not a red diaper baby, but I am raising a red diaper baby. And I will make sure that my 4-year-old son will continue the tradition of revolutionary socialist ideas. And to give you an example of some of the things we do, because I'm teaching him sayings, he likes no justice, no peace, but his favorite that he likes is, we don't trust bourgeois capitalist press. And I will make sure to record that so you don't think I'm lying. He does say it, I promise you. What we saw after the election of Trump, with the work that our organization has been able to do, Socialist Alternative, just shows that our ideas are the right ones. In the US, for decades, the word socialism has been used as a taboo word. It has been stigmatized. To be a socialist, you're ostracized or you're looked at like you're crazy. But for a socialist organization of about 900 members to make a call and within hours get 40,000 people on the streets protesting against a rigged election shows the power of socialist ideas. course, the bourgeois capitalist press, as my son likes, CNN, to conduct an interview with our member in Oakland, California. And they actually played nice because CNN is very open to attacking left radicals. But millions of people had the opportunity to hear real, genuine socialist ideas and a rejection of the two-party system at the time where it probably had the most viewership because the protests were happening at that time. We were able to get in on the conversation and present our ideas on corporate media and get 40,000 people in the streets. No other organization was able to make that call and do that. Since then, we have seen huge interest in our organization. Within 27 hours, we had 400 online applicants signing up to join our organization. In Boston, immediately the next day, we had a public meeting where 400 people attended to hear our ideas on how to build a genuine workers' party and how to advance against capitalism with genuine socialist ideas. That's not including our Facebook pages that have been blowing up and individual contacts that have been reaching out to us. What we are seeing that the possibility of building a workers' party in the U.S. is more prominent now than it has ever been before, and it gives me great, great joy. So, I have to sum up, but I would appeal to anyone here that now is more than ever the time to get in the streets and fight, to fight against capitalism. It has proven itself time and time again as a failed system. It cannot deliver any of its promises, and it will continue to fail. And if you are not a member of Socialist Party UK, I suggest you join, because now the struggle is, we have the opportunity to win the struggle against exploitation and inequality and advance an international socialist movement that fights on behalf of workers, that says, fuck you to the capitalists, we won't take it anymore, you will not run our lives, and true socialism and power to the people will remain true. Join our movement and let's fight and build a society that our children can be proud of, a society that works for everyone, despite your race, your religion, your sexual orientation. We have the opportunity now to win. And I say, let's get free, family. Yeah.